Welcome everyone to Shirat Yom HaZikaron Teges. Tonight we're going to be hearing about two particular soldiers out of 25,240. The speakers that we have tonight are very unique and personal and dynamic in their own way, and I have no doubt that we're going to be able to grow from each one of these stories. The first individual we're going to be hearing from tonight is from Rav Binny Freedman. Rav Binny actually taught me over 30 years ago in Mivaseret Zion. Actually left a very deep impression on me as someone who gave up a great life in America to be able to come here and to go to the army. He's someone that's gone on to write and to teach and to lecture and to always stay so engaged, and he's someone in our midst. I can't even believe that we have a chance to be with you tonight. But his chevrutah that he had in the 80s, Daniel, is someone that obviously left a deep impression on him, and we're going to have a chance to be able to learn about as well. And after Rav Binny, we're going to have a chance to hear about Ephraim Jackman from his father, and I'll speak a little bit about him as well. With that, Rav Binny, I'll ask you to be able to come up and please share some of your thoughts and impressions from Daniel.
Dani is 20 years old, and he remains 20 years old. And he'll be 20 years old forever. Every year, twice a year, on Yutet Be'Adav and on Yom HaZikaron, tomorrow morning, I go to his kever again, run into some of our common friends. And we get older, and the hair gets a little whiter, and we got married, we had children, we had grandchildren, and Dani remains 20 years old. Eze totah chaya Dani. In 1981, after I graduated high school, I came to Israel to what I thought was going to be to learn for a year, to Gush. And then I decided I was going to stay Shana B'Her to me, but in some ways they were much older. And you know how it is. You're in the Americans, you're in the American program, your friends are American, you speak English, you don't really speak Hebrew. So the Americans tended to sit with each other at the lunch table, and the English sat with each other, and the Israelis sat with each other. And the Shana Aleph guys found their own tables because, they were this one's from that high school. And this. I decided I'm never going to get to know them this way. So I decided every night for dinner, I would sit with the Israelis at one of the Israeli tables. And I figured I'll sit with the same table, 8 people at a table. I'll get to know 6, 7 guys. It was a horrible experience. I did this for about 2 months, maybe 3 months, I don't remember. And I didn't know how to break into this chevra. I didn't really understand the Hebrew. My conversations consisted of, would you pass the salt? And, schnitzel. And there was one guy at the table who was like the ringleader. He was tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, had a presence about him. Whenever he said something, everybody laughed. And I would try to laugh along with him, even though I had no idea what was funny. And this went on for about 2 months. And my friends, because I had lots of friends, they would look at me suffer at this table. And sometimes, and I remember Chaim Marder came over and said, why are you sitting there every night? Like, you look like you're, no, I got to get to know these guys. I'm going to the army with them. Okay. So one night, it's about 2.5 months into this failing experiment, And I'm sitting next to this tall, blonde boy. And he looks at me, and he says to me, as I'm getting my tray and gathering my stuff to leave dinner, after yet another unsuccessful evening, he looks at me and goes, "Tatislach li, ma ta ose po?" Like, what are you doing here? And in retrospect, he meant it as an innocent question, but, to someone with an American, my mother's English, so it just seemed like such a horrible thing to say. So I looked at him, and in my broken Hebrew, I said, "Well, I'm going into the army with you, so I thought I would get to know you guys, but I guess that was a mistake." And I get up and I walk away. Okay? So he comes over to me the next morning in morning seder, and he says, "Orayta otze chevrutah. Maybe you want to have a chevrutah together, like to learn together." So I was like, wow, like home run. This is finally going to go somewhere. So I said, "Sure, like vadai." So he says, "Okay, look, it's already, we're deep into Elul, like, Cheshvan, Tevet, I don't know, whatever month we were in. And, we all have our chevrutah already. The only time I really have free is like 1:30. I was like, 1:30, like 1 o'clock is lunch, 1:30 is the break. That's the only time you have, like, to grab a nap, play some ball, minchas at 3. But I figured, like, you want this." So I said, "Okay." אז 1:30. סגרנו. Right, great. So I finish my lunch, and I go to the base medrash at 1:30, 1:45, 2 o'clock, 2:15. I'm getting really annoyed, because, like, I maybe forgot about it. It was only a few hours ago. Finally, like, 2:30, he's not showing, so I figured I had no point in going back to my room. Me and the other 30 tzaddikim who were learning during the break. And so I just waited, and then, finished learning whatever I was learning, and daven mincha. And after mincha, I go up to the rampa where he was sitting. I was looking for him to see what happened. And he's sitting there learning with someone. And I said to him, "Makara?" And he looked like, "What happened?" And he looks up at me. He's like, "Blah, blah, blah," which in retrospect is mastumat makara, right? But I couldn't. So I said, 1:30. We said 1:30. He looks at me and he suddenly realizes that I thought, he said, 1:30 baboker. I said, 1:30 baboker. He said, "Yeah." He said, "During the break, I learn with a kolelnik. I go to the yeshuv. I have a kolel yeshuv chevrutah, and I have chevrutah until 1 o'clock, 1:15. So I figure I'll take a break. I'll get a cup of coffee, and we'll learn for half an hour, and we'll go to sleep at 2 instead of 1:30. I look at him as 1:30. But you asked for it, so from then on, almost every night, 1:30 in the morning, we had a chevrutah. I think we started with Ramchal, we did Mesilat Yesharim, and paced my eyes open. From that day, Dani decided to make it his business to make sure that I would get to know every boy in the Machzor. Every time there was a birthday party, I got invited. Every time there was a tiyul. 3 of the guys decide they're borrowing neshek from somebody, they're going to walk into Beit Lechem. In those days, you could still do that. Didn't tell my mother, but I'm with them, right? And I became part of the Machzor because of Dani. And I met his family. And then we went into the army. And I really wanted to be with Dani because he was really the Israeli that took me under his wing. But he had scoliosis, or mild scoliosis. He had to wear a back brace. He was determined to be Kravi. So for 6 months, he would wear his back brace. He'd go running without it, put it right back on all the time. This horrible thing that went around his neck. And so because of this, he succeeded in whatever it was he needed to succeed in, and he got into infantry. He went to Givati. And I tried to go with him, but I had glasses, and back then, if you had glasses beyond a certain, you couldn't go into. So they sent me to Shirat. I fought to get in, didn't work. Sent me to Shirat. And we kind of weren't that much in touch because he was in the army, I was in the army, we were in training. But then the way it worked back then, today it's not like that. You did Hesder. You had like the Hesdernikim did like 9 months. I was a little longer. I did sergeant's course. And then you came back for like half a year to yeshiva, and then you went in for your second stint. They don't do this anymore because it doesn't work. So we went back to yeshiva, and we picked up our chevrutah. Only now I'm much more Israeli. My Hebrew's better. I was in the army for a year. I remember one day, I'm walking into the Beit Midrash. I'm actually running. I'm late. And there was a bank of payphones. I think most of the people in this room know what a payphone is. The older ones can explain it to the younger one. You had to actually pay to call, right? And And I see Dani is on one of the payphones. And I'm walking up the steps to the Beit Midrash, and I hear him giggling. Now, Dani doesn't giggle. He has an unbelievable smile, lights up the room. And he has this deadpan humor, and he says it, and but he isn't a giggler. I was like, huh? So I walk a little closer to hear, like, because somebody said they thought he met a girl, but he was very private about that stuff. So I figured I'm going to have some fun. I walk closer, and I see he's speaking in perfect English. So I stand there, and my mouth is open. And I'm like standing there. And he finally notices me and flashes me one of his smiles, go back to his call. So after mincha, I go over to him, I go, "What? You speak English?" He says, "Of course I speak English. My parents are English, you know that. I came here when I was 3 years old, 4 years old." I said, "You speak English? Are you kidding me?" He puts his hand on my shoulder, I'll never forget this. He says, "אם הייתי מדבר איתך אנגלית, היית לומד עברית?" And that was Dani. Ish princip, he was a man of principle. There was a story that went out about him before he was killed. They were up in Lebanon. They were in a mutzav called Milano, the second stint. So his unit was sent up to Lebanon, and at that time, the security zone. This is 1985, March of 1985. Actually, they went in January, February, maybe earlier, September, and the security zone was much further north, up above the Awali River. And they were on, or up above Litana, they were above the Awali. And they were on a mutzav that was not far from the river. And this was sort of in the middle of the security zone. And they were doing like siyurim, whatever it was. And during our second chevrutah, they decided to move the lines further back, part of the arrangements to try to get a little peace in the area, whatever. And the Israeli army pulled back down to the Litani. And all of a sudden, their position was on the front line. They weren't supposed to be on the front line, but now they were the front. They were the northmost position of the entire Israeli army in Lebanon. And very quickly, they started to feel it. They were going on a siyur one day. You want to talk about principles? He would get annoyed at the guys because they would, there are cherry trees in cherry orchards in Lebanon, in the no man's land, in a certain area. And anybody who's ever been in Lebanon knows those cherries. They're unbelievable, right? And you're walking through like minefields everywhere, and you're Hezbollah over here, and the Syrians over there. And so you pick the cherries. It's not a big deal. And Dani all of a sudden is like, "Who says we can pick these cherries? How do you know you can pick these cherries?" Mapitom. Now in those days, you didn't have a phone in your pocket. And it was very hard to get a phone line. There was one phone in the mutzav, and it only worked certain hours of the day. And you had to sort of stand in line to get like a 3-minute phone call. And he waited his 3 days, and he got his 3-minute phone call. And instead of calling his parents, he tracked down Rav Amital, Rosh Yeshiva of Gush, to find out whether you're allowed to pick cherries in the no man's land. You don't know who the owner is. You don't know if he has, the Gemara in Bava Metzia says, Yeush, if an owner gives up, if you can assume that he's given up hope for something, then it's hefker, then it's free for the taking. But if you don't know that, given the circumstances, it might be it's not allowed. Does it apply to a non-Jewish farmer? It took him 3 tries until he finally managed to get Rav Amital. Rav Amital said, "No, you actually can't take them. You're right. You don't know. And the Baalim are going to want to come back to their orchards. And even with a non-Jew in Mishum Eva, he made it his business to make sure that none of the guys picked the cherries. They loved him for that. But that was Dani. They, when you go to siyurim, when you do patrols, so one of the things you try to do is to change up your routine. You don't want anybody watching you to see that you go the same way every day. So one day the officer decided they're going to cut through a melon field because he felt they were walking on the same road too often. And Dani got very upset because the guys weren't paying attention and they were stepping on the melons. And he said, "Be careful, this is somebody's field." And they look at him, "We're in Lebanon. There's Hezbollah around. And you're worried about melons?" And he said to them, this came out in one of the Hespedim after one of the eulogies. And Dani said to them, "When we're done here and we go back and we're home, some Lebanese farmer is going to come back to his field. And he should feel that he has a field and that he didn't lose it because of Israeli soldiers." I can't even begin to imagine thinking that kind of thought in the middle of a siyur in Lebanon. Their unit had a couple of tough experiences. They actually were hit by an RPG. It's a miraculous story. None of them were hurt. They made a Sudat Todaya that night. You know, they felt they were invincible. Hesdernikim. They had chevrutah until the 19th of Adar. 19th of Adar, they went out on a patrol, a place in a bridge called Gesher Kasmiya. They were an 8-man patrol. The Mefaked Kita, who was leading the patrol, was actually Tesla, one of the other guys from our Machzor. And a Hezbollah unit snuck up on the edge of the bridge and opened fire on them. And Dani and Didi Cohen from Haifa, also Gushnik, were terribly wounded. There were 2 Chofshim. I spoke to David Rosenberg, who's a friend of mine, who had this tremendous dilemma. You know, on the one hand, their buddies are wounded. On the other hand, there's a Hezbollah unit there. Do you stop and try to help your buddy? Or do you continue the attack until you're done? And that's a dilemma that every battle soldier faces from time to time. And they lost both of them. And I remember, you know, there's certain moments in life, you remember exactly where you were. You remember what you were doing, what you were thinking, right? Any Jew who was in Israel when Rabin was assassinated knows exactly where he was. Anybody in New York or America during the World Trade, exactly where we were. I can tell you exactly what I was doing. We were in Kurstinim. We were in the second half of officers' course. We were headed back down to Shizafon. And we were in Beersheba waiting for a bus. And one of the other Gushnikim who was with me in Kurstinim officers' course came over and said, Shamata, there was a pigua, you know, an attack. Yesh levaya b'Yerushalayim hayom, Moshitz. You think it could be Dani? And I said, nah, we would have heard. I don't know why I said that. Like, how would we have heard? We didn't have cell phones. But I just thought, like, you would know something like that. He said, I'm going to see if we can go to the funeral. I said, okay. And I'm thinking, like, you know, can't lose. Go to Yerushalayim, go to somebody's funeral and have a day off, right? So he goes over to our Fakdim, and they have very specific numbers, and when you do maneuvers on the tank, you need a certain number of guys. So he said, I can only let one of you go. So I said to Avi, look, you know, you went to high school with him, you knew him. It's okay. And the truth is, it was very hard for me in officers' course. I didn't really want to miss a day or two of studies, and I was sure it wasn't Dani. And so I wasn't really worried about it. I just thought, like, he pulled a fast one and got a day off. So we get on the bus, and we head down to Mitzpeh Ramon. There's no good way to find these things out. But buying a newspaper at a newsstand in Mitzpeh Ramon and seeing one of your closest friends' pictures in the newspaper is not the way to do it. I'm standing there in a newsstand and I see not just Dani but Didi, and it's like the whole world falls out from under you. And you have to understand, you're in an officer's course. You're getting on a bus with like these really hard Israelis, and you're sitting on a bus and you just lose it because lo akhpat lecha. I didn't make the funeral. I managed to make the last night of the Shiva. It was the first time I really saw what happens to a family. Because there is Dani Moshitz's father before and Dani Moshitz's father after. I would run into him in Rananim because that's where they davened in Yerushalayim, and he always had a twinkle in his eye, like his son, and a smile and a chizbat, like a funny line. And after, it was like the light went out in his eyes. And you know when I really got this? I really got it at my wedding. When we got married, we have it's like our minhag amongst the chevra back then, that when we got married, we invited the families of those who fell, you know, the parents of Dani, of Didi, a couple other, Rami Malik. And so they came. They came, the Balmels, whose son Zach had been missing for a while. And they came to the chuppah. And after the chuppah, you know how it is, you go take pictures, and they're having the first course, and then they do the first dance. And the first dance is winding down. Somebody came over to tell me, you know, Dani's parents are leaving. So I wanted to see them, and I wanted to also introduce them to Dorit. So we went over to say goodbye to them. And that was the first time I really got it. You know, you look into a mother's eyes, and I suddenly realized she wasn't at my wedding. She wasn't looking at my wedding. She was at his wedding. And she was wondering, who was the girl that he would never meet? Who were the children that would never be born? Who were the grandchildren that they would never bounce on their knee? Dani Moshitz is 20 years old. He's buried in Chelka Daled, Ezor Daled, Chelka Yasa. He's actually right next to Chaim Avner, whose brother lives here in Efrat. And he will lie there at Chayolim. And I guess the question to think about, there's no understanding why these things happen. But there is the question of what we can do with it. And I want to share one last story with you. I had a student. He learned here in Neve Shmuel. His name was Dvir Mochaim. And I met him because I was interviewing, or a final interview with Mayor Krause, who was then the principal at Neve Shmuel. I was going to be a madrich. This is before I got married. And they said I had to meet him, but I had already met with the Frishkin, and they said, we want you to do this job, but I didn't know. So I'm waiting outside the principal's office. It brought back a lot of memories. And there's another boy who's sitting there, and he's like a high school kid, and he looks like he's waiting outside the principal's office. So I had Rachmanut on him, that was definitely me in 11th grade. And so I started talking to him, and we kind of hit it off. And, I had a nice 10-minute conversation. Then they called me, they're ready for me to come in. And I go into this interview, and whatever went well, I guess. And at the end, he says, okay, we'd be happy to welcome you. We think you'll do a good job, or whatever. And I said, can I ask you do you know which grade I'll have? As a machzor. So he says, I don't know. They'll make that decision. So I said, well, if it's possible, can you write down, I'd love to have machzor the shvistim. He said, why? The 11th graders said, why? I said, well, because I just met a boy, Dvir outside. Seems like a good kid. We hit it off. I'll know one kid when we start. So he smiles. He says, well, I don't know if Dvir will be here next year. Now, I don't know what made me say this. It's probably a dumb thing, trying to impress the boss. But I said to him, well, you know what? If he's here, I'll take him on as a project. So he looks at me like, that's a little chutzpah, okay? And I walked outside wondering if that was a dumb thing to say. And then I forgot about it because I was in June. September, I show up 2 days before the year starts. Moshe Sudri is going through all the students. And I'm going to have the shvistim. And he gets to Dvir Morchaim's name. And he says, Evanti shezeh olech liot projekt shelcha. I understand you're taking this boy on as a project. I have no idea what I've gotten myself into. So I decided I got to make him a project. So he became my project. What an unbelievable kid. He became one of the leaders of the class. He graduated with honors. Such a great kid. Such a totach. He was the guy who would help me wake guys up. He was the guy who would organize Shabbatot. Amazing kid. Probably some learning disabilities. He left Neve Shmuel. He went to Eli. After Eli, he became a tzanchen. He did kurs makim. And a few years later, I'm sitting in our little living room in the kollel in Efrat, in our lunchwood when I was learning for smicha. And we had this little black and white TV, and the news comes on. And there was a terrible story, not for now. And Dvir Mochaim was killed in Lebanon. And you don't expect it. You're sitting in your living room. And my wife hears me scream, and she comes running in. You feel like you got pitched in the stomach. And so, after I visit Dani, I visit Dvir. And one year, I was at Dvir's kever. I was taking a group around her Herzl and figured I had a little time, so I went to see his kever. And I'm walking up to the kever up the steps, and there's a piece of paper on the floor. And you never see litter in her Herzl. So I thought, okay, it must be some tekes, somebody dropped it. And so I'll just pick up and throw it in the garbage, and I took a look at it, and it was a letter. It was a letter that had obviously been left on the gravestone. And I want to read this and with this I'll end, because there are no words that will follow this. But this is what this day is. Dvirush. Kvar 15 shanim, 15 years, she'anu acharei ha'preda hakasha, that we have been after the difficult goodbye, והכואבת, the painful goodbye, ובלתי נתפסת, the unimaginable, ממך, from you. שנה אחר שנה, year after year, אנו באים, we come, ומסרבים לשכוח אותך, we refuse to forget you. לא רוצים וגם לא יכולים, we don't want to and we can't. אתה רחקת, you have gone away. אך אצלנו קרוב נשארת. but you're close to us, always. Yesh b'libeinu makom. There is in our hearts a place. Shu rak shalcha. It's only yours. Mirvach, a space. She'no mitztamtzem im hazman. It doesn't contract with time. Gaguim she'olim v'nishanim. Longings that come up again and again. B'chol irua mashmauti b'chayenu. In every significant event in our lives. U'b'chol mifgash she'anu zochim. V'roim et hatzetzaim. And in every encounter, when we get together and we see the new offspring, shenosfu le'mishpachteinu, that have been added to our family, anu mesaprim le'em dvir. We tell them, dvir, sheyesh od ben dod. There's another cousin. Od shatil. Sheyesh lo chelek b'chayenu. Another planting who has a part of our lives. Ani umot milim. I'm speechless. Umarshe la'atzmi, but I allow myself, gam bishmam, in the name of all shel kol hashutafim ba'avatenu elecha, to say these words in the name of all those who love you. אז המכתב הזה, דביר, אני משאירה כאן אצלך. So this letter, Dvir, I leave with you. I made a copy of it and obviously gave it back to the family. Yeh zechram baruch.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your hearts on Dani. The next heart that we'll have a chance to be able to hear from is Rav Shmuel Jackman. Now, Rav Shmuel, I know you just came in. Ephraim's Levaya and Shiva call that I personally paid was, for me, the most personal and hardest. Maybe it was just because we came from similar backgrounds, we both made Aliyah, we both live in the Gush. Our sons are the same age. And even though Ephraim is Givati and my son's Golani, there's a rivalry there. That Shiva, the stories that I heard about this boy are something that stayed with me until today. You always hear incredible stories about people at the Shivas, but I saw his report cards. I remember they were there. And I know that he was a musician. And he finished like Shas Mishnayos, maybe even twice by his bar mitzvah. Like I mean, just absolutely super incredible things. And when I think of him, and when I see you, and when I'm by his kever, which we all should be able to, my trips to Meron have been a lot less because we have tzaddikim right here in our own backyard. I think of how incredible, not just this boy was and how much more we all could be for ourselves, but I also think about the incredible sacrifice and the carbon, that the price that we paid. And so there's no words of consolation I could personally say, except that he is someone that is dear to me, to all of us. These high ideals that he was able to live is something that is still very much alive and a level that I think about. Jackman, I'm happy to have you here.
I'm very aware that Ephraim wouldn't want me to make the speech about him. 2 reasons. One, he was very humble. We didn't realize how modest, how humble, how anav he was till we started hearing stories about him. And it probably was because his teacher in Orot Etzion Efrat made them start the week with Igeret HaRamban. Ephraim, being Ephraim, listened to his teachers. He said there was no one he couldn't learn from. He would learn from everybody around him. Certainly in the army, in his army service, that's what he was telling his friends. He didn't believe there was anyone he couldn't learn from. But as a kid, in school in Efrat, he grew up in Alon Shvut, in Neve Daniel, but went to Orayta here. He listened to his teachers. And Ephraim, being Ephraim, started the week in yeshiva. When he got to Hesdi Yeshiva in Yerucham, he started the week in yeshiva also with Igeret HaRamban, with his friends. And we all know Igeret HaRamban, it's all about humility. He didn't just learn it, he lived it, he did it, he made it happen. And the more stories we heard, the more we realized that that's what he did. He would do what he learned. He would things he learned from his parents, he would do better than his parents know how to do, and things he learned at school. And then in Yud Bet, they taught them about eating healthily. So he took a few months, but he did it. And in Azza, during the war, he was everybody else was eating snacks, and he was eating tchina with whatever bread he could get, tchina and tuna. They said they didn't see him eat one snack, because that's what he learned in school. They also said that if you really want to have a kinyan in Torah, you have to pick one Masechet of Gemara and just learn it till you know it. So one of his friends told us that he's pretty sure Ephraim learned Masechet Brachot at least 15 times. He did what he was told. Very humble man. But the reason I don't want to concentrate on Ephraim is actually because he's not alone. We call it Yom HaZikaron. Really, Yom HaZikaron is Rosh Hashanah, of course. It's Yom HaZikaron. Yom HaZikaron Chalei Marachot Yisrael commemorates thousands of soldiers. And the more I read, the more hespedim I listen to, the more funerals, unfortunately, we've had to go to. It doesn't seem to matter if they have a kippah on their head or they don't have a kippah on their head. I find stories, character qualities that remind me of my son. It was a friend of our family, a friend of my father's big brother, who lost his son in the Yom Kippur War. So I got myself a copy of what they wrote about the people from the kibbutz, the non-religious kibbutz, who fell in the Yom Kippur War. You just find stories that sound like Ephraim. They sound like the stories you hear now. 50 years have passed, and it's the same Ruach HaGvura, it's the same heroism, it's the same modesty. And I realized that he's part of something much bigger. People who use their talents for others, whole people that could be both intellectual and physical, musical and fighters, people who help because of ideals, people who really listen to others, people who notice the person that is having a hard time, who don't want to take the credit, who think, what does my people need, instead of what's good for me, who really want to be in the war where they're needed, and are willing to die to save their friends. I could tell you a lot of stories about Ephraim that fit all of those. But I think I just feel we go through these hespedim and it's over and over. It's the same things. I'm not talking about Ephraim. I'm talking about a kind of person that we are so lucky to have among us, and not just dead ones. There are a lot of live ones walking around. Ephraim's the song that Ephraim wrote in Azza is now kind of popular on YouTube. Maybe I'll mention a little bit about that. People who use their talents for others. here's a boy who, okay, so we taught him piano, but he actually was very good at it. And then he made us also pay for drum lessons. And then he taught himself guitar. And you can imagine. And he's sitting in a namer in Azza, and he's trying to make people happier. And he's playing his mouth organ to lighten the mood. That's important. And after about a week or so of fighting, so it's Shabbat, and him and his good friend who were sitting really together for months on end in this namer, they were near a patzmar, near a rocket-propelled grenade, and they saw it explode. And they got back in the namer, and they were shaken, and they were singing Surah Shishit songs. And his friend turns to him and says, you know, I feel we should be able to sing Mina Meitzah Karatiyah, because I feel the Meitzah, but all the songs I know for Mina Meitzah are all very happy tunes. They're about Merchaviyah. They're about the good part of the pasuk. So we write after Yom Kippur, we're all crazy singing that song, really happy. Maybe we could make a nigun that will help us through what we're going through the fear of dying, through the fear of being in a war where people are dying. And he used his talents to help others. He taught. They wrote the nigun together. He had real musical talent. And they taught it the next Surah Shishit next week, and then when his friend from Yeshiva died, they again a week or two later, Eitan Rosenzweig, so he was makdish the song to him, and then unfortunately another friend fell, so they said, okay, we'll makdish also to him, and Ephraim turns up straight from Azza at the shloshim of his friend Eitan. It was the last time he was home before Ephraim died. And he goes up to the parents, just who lost their son 30 days before, and he wants to make them happy. We have a tune for him. We have a song for him, for his memory. In the end, it was memory of four of him and 3 of his friends. The fourth fell after he'd already recorded singing the song. Recorded singing the song. So if you find it on YouTube, it's Mina Meitzah Yerucham. You'll find it quickly. We all know Hesder is, it's Torah and it's fighting, but was it music? Whole people who help because of ideals. Ephraim was doing kitchen duty. They had a week of kitchen duty. So there's a group of yeshiva guys. They're really into it because they're like, if I'm not in yeshiva, so I'm going to be into fighting. I'm going to be a fighter. I'm going to be kravi. That's what Am Yisrael needs. And then the army says, do a week of kitchen duty. You can imagine this wasn't fun at all. And Ephraim seemed to be very helpful and very good and kept trying to help people be positive. And people were like, what's going through his head? They're being so nasty to us. They're making us work so hard. They see that we're good and they give us extra jobs to do. Apparently they just found things that had never been washed for years, and they were giving it to Ephraim to wash, to clean. There was like a barbecue, and they were trying to get him to and he scratched it all out and cleaned it very nicely. It was shining. Has it been used since? I don't know. But he was happy, and they just couldn't get it until we find what he wrote. He wrote something in his diary, found it during the Shiva, called Mitpach, kitchen. And there he writes about how when you do things just to get by, just to check boxes, it's not positive. It's not even, there's nothing good about it. You're hardly living. He said, I want to live a life of ideals, of shining ideals. And you can imagine him scratching the barbecue clean and thinking about shining ideals. Again, there's all these stories about people who listen to others. it's so hard. We're all on our phones. We're all, at the best of times. And when we're talking what we want to say. It's very hard to listen. And all these stories about how he just listened. You're in the army, you're stuck with somebody for 4 hours, for 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is, for a shmirah. And why is it 2 people? So neither of you fall asleep, or at least one of you doesn't fall asleep. And he writes, again in his diary, about how this is an opportunity to get to know somebody. And he would sit there and listen to them and bring out their deepest thoughts and really help them through things. The first thing I said to people who notice the person who's having a hard time, the first person who came up to me at the end of the Hespedim at Ephraim's funeral was a guy who was with him in Orayta. I don't know who he is. I don't know. Maybe he's in this room. Maybe he's the son of somebody in this room. I don't know who he was. We didn't know him before. Didn't know him afterwards. He said that he made Aliyah in Kita Zayin, and for those 2 years in school, Ephraim was his friend. Ephraim saw that he's an Oleh Chadash, that he doesn't know what to do, doesn't have friends, and Ephraim was just there for him, everything he needed. Who didn't want to take the credit. No, we didn't know any of these stories. And of course, when he got to the army, like so many of his friends, it wasn't what's good for me. It's what does the people need? He was great at computers. He could have been Modi'in, no problem. Shmonim Matayim, whatever he wanted. He started trying for Tayis until he realized that then he wouldn't be able to learn in yeshiva. So, what's needed? Kravi. That's what's needed. And he didn't take Golani. It's too cool. It's like your Givati. Okay, fine. And then, of course, it was, do you want to be an officer? So the first thought was, well, I'll miss a few months of yeshiva. I'll go back to yeshiva later. I want to learn. It's like, no. If you do this course, it'll be the same amount of army time. You'll do your officer work, in Miluim. Don't worry about it. He was like, but do they need me as an officer? Really? Do they need me? In the end, his friends went off to a course makim, and he was in Chawara, which is not the nicest place, not the quietest place, and there was no mak. So they said, Ephraim, you just stand in for the mak. Mak was in charge of 10 soldiers, 8 soldiers. And then there was no mem. So 30 yeshiva guys got Ephraim as their replacement mem. And all his friends who just got off to learn to be officers said, I don't understand. It takes 3 years to become mem, and you're ready. He did a great job. He got an award for it too, which again, we knew there was some piece of paper. We didn't know what it was till somebody explained to us what at the Shiva, what we were looking at. And of course, willing to die to save their friends. So many stories. And I mean, it is so easy to get out of being in Azza. You're just, someone who doesn't want to be in Azza for the last year and a half, it's so easy. They'll throw you out, do anything wrong. They don't want people who don't want to be there. Ephraim is calling. He is closest we remember to him being depressed was those days before we went into Azza that he thought he wasn't going in. They hadn't found a place for him in Amer. And he got his friend who wrote the tomb with him. Not only did his friend write the tomb with him and sit with him for 2 months, his friend also was in the same Montreal Kollel, right? It's Rav Listener's son, but not at the same time. Ephraim was in Kollel Termitzion Montreal from age 2, and Matanel from age 6. And Matanel and Ephraim's telling Matanel, okay, here's a list of people to call. You'll call this half, I'll call this half of the list, and we're going to call, and we're going to get in. And of course, he calls one of the mems from Hawara, who remembers him And I was like, yeah, I could do with someone like Ephraim in my Namer. I don't think it was a hard sell, to be honest. There are a lot of our people who fit the description. Most of them are not dead. What a zchut that we live among people like this. I don't know about you. I grew up in England. I went to a school where all that was important was grades, I think. Got into Oxford. My parents were very happy. And it was all me, 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 me. I ended up in the same college as Lucy D. She was the religious person in my year. She helped me out as a Bal Tshuva. She showed me what to do, where to go. And even when I left Oxford and went to Yeshivat Orayta, it was, okay, you're going to be here. What were my parents saying? You'll be a rabbi, you'll do this. You know? And I was like, learn some Torah, get Olam Haba, connect to Eretz Yisrael. Self-fulfillment. It was all me, me, me. It really was. Like, I was trying, but everyone around me was just trying to do what's good for you. And I remember in yeshiva, the Rav Aaron Lichtenstein would sing the Haftarah on fast days. The people who don't have children, the Sorisim. And Hashem promises them, Yad Vashem Tov mibanim umibanot, Shem olam eten lo, asher lo yikaret. And I'll be like, wait. Hashem, you're going to give these people who can't have children a memorial that's better than children? An eternal name that will never be cut off? No, I don't want that. Who wants that? We want children. Like, I want to be part of Am Yisrael. I want to have descendants. My family nearly died out in the Shoah. Like, I want to be part of the Jewish people. How can it... I couldn't... It was so hard for me. And you go through life. You go through a few funerals. Finally, I got to the funeral of Ephraim's friend, the first one from Yeshiva of his friends who fell. Eitan Rosenzweig's funeral. And something changed inside. They were talking about how the soldiers who give their lives for Am Yisrael, they go up to Kisei HaKavod, they're with Rabbi Akiva. It's words, near from the Gemara. Okay. But something was changing inside when Ephraim arrived home, went straight from Azza to the Shloshim of Eitan. The next morning was Asar B'Tevet. So instead of having a barbecue, my son was having a fast day after months in Azza, which was fine for him. Yeah, didn't complain. I didn't even think about it. And I was sitting next to him in Mincha, and I suddenly had this big chidush. I was like, oh, I got it. Why do I want banim ubanot? Why all my life did I want to have children? Why was it so important to bring up children in Eretz Yisrael? Why was it so important? What was I trying to do? Wasn't it because I wanted to be part of Am Yisrael? What can be more part of Am Yisrael than to be somebody who made Am Yisrael be able to be here, be able to exist? Somebody without whom there would be no Am Yisrael. I called Ephraim after the mitzvah, Prurevu. He was my boy after my girl. I blessed him so many times he would have children, you can't believe it. I had a premonition too, but I so wanted him to have children. It was so difficult. But that's not what it's about. Yad Vashem Tov mibanim umibanot. There's something beyond having children. It's not about me, and it's not about my children. It's about being part of Am Yisrael, being part of the brit between Hashem and Am Yisrael. On Pesach, my brother-in-law came for a few days for Chol HaMoed, and they came and visited us. And as a result, my 16-year-old daughter wrote me a thank you note, which of course was on WhatsApp, and of course was in Hebrew. Her cousins had come from England to see us, and she suddenly realized that she wanted to thank me for making Aliyah. It hit her how hard it is to make Aliyah. Language, culture, feeling like a foreigner in your own country. Right? In England I'm Jewish, and here I'm English, right? And how much easier it is for her. And how much more meaningful her life is living in our land. And she wrote the following, I translated it. And between the words, I hear Ephraim's voice telling my father, look, look, it's so worthwhile. והשיב לבבות הבנים ולבנים על אבותם. I'm so happy that my children, even after going through this, losing their brother, they can feel that how amazing it is to be here. How amazing it is their father made Aliyah. But of course, it's nothing compared to how much I feel for them and for all their generation and all the children growing up here. If our children can thank us, we should also thank them. Because they took our small contribution of making Aliyah and they're building on it. They're connecting us to who we're supposed to be. We came out of Mitzrayim chamushim, with weapons. Avraham Avinu fought a world war. We fought Amalek before we got the Torah. David HaMelech was both a Torah leader, a warrior, a musician, and a poet. And now we have children who can again be full, whole Jews in their own land. And we say, Tei nishmatam tzura b'tzura chayim. But that's really it. What's the tzura chayim? Well, you put the stone on the kever. You're saying we're all connected to Hashem and to each other, to Am Yisrael, but we're still stones. We're still individuals. We're individuals that only mean something when they're part of the whole. And who's more tzurur b'tzura chayim than Ephraim and all his friends and all these people? Tei nishmatam tzura b'tzura chayim.
Thank you, Rabbi Jackman. That was extremely moving and very appropriate for this evening. I ask everyone to please rise now, and we will conclude with HaZikaron and the Imamim. I'd like to thank again Rabbi Jackman and Rabbi Binny Freedman for sharing this evening. Thank you everyone for coming out. Wishing everyone a good evening and B'sol Tovot. For those interested, there will be tefillah downstairs in the Beit Midrash starting in 2 minutes.